becoming a composer is about sharing your music. The music that whatever you create has to then become observed by someone else or performed by someone else in my case. So it was really about having the bravery to get over that one crucial step of, I have created this thing and now I'm going to share it with somebody.
Welcome to Arts Engines. I am your host, Aaron Dworkin. And with us today, we have Jessie Montgomery, who is an acclaimed composer, violinist, educator, member of the Catalyst Quartet, and has just recently joined the faculty of the Mannes School of Music. She's the recipient of multiple awards. As always, I'll let you read the bios of our wonderful, amazing guests. But I should share that I feel uniquely lucky to have been able to know Jessie now for literally a couple of decades and be able to see the breadth of her extraordinary work. So it is an honor to have you on the show. Welcome, Jessie.
Thank you so much, Aaron. It's such a pleasure to be able to speak with you, and thank you for inviting me in conversation. This is really a treat. So for sure.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, and I know your schedule must be really swamped these days. And and for this show, one of our creative partners, the Dallas Symphony, really joined us to kind of co-curate and to select you as a guest to talk about especially some of these aspects that relate to composing, not only the work that you're doing in Dallas, but how this kind of impacts and ripples through our field. So why don't we just start off with, you're doing some incredible work with Dallas. Can you kind of share a little of that with our viewers?
Sure. So last fall, I was invited to take part in the first ever Women in Classical Music conference that was hosted by the Dallas Symphony last fall, and I flew out and gave a kind of a talk-back conversation about new music's role in the future of orchestras. And so that was, and it was also, they performed my piece Starburst, which was commissioned by the Sphinx organization in 2013. So they performed that piece that weekend, and then we had the conference, which was an incredible event that they'll continue on to have this fall, and I'll be coming back virtually to participate in the conference this fall. And I am slated to have a new work premiere by the Dallas Symphony in 2022. So that's an exciting, and that's going to be, I'm really looking forward to that, because we're going to pull out all the stops for that one. We're having no restrictions on instrumentation, really. I mean, not no restrictions, but I've been given the kind of a carte blanche as from Peter Czerny, bless and thank you, Peter, for.
That's got to be great as a composer to have that freedom to explore. So thinking about kind of this idea of women in composition, and as it relates to orchestras, as you think about the time that you spent there and some of the ideas that you shared, what do you say to those who say why is this relevant? Why should we be talking about women composers in orchestral music?
I think, we should be, for the same reason that we talk about having more diverse ethnic and national backgrounds of composers. We talk also about having more representation by women, and these things are important, because the more voices that we bring into the fold, the more music and the more bountiful the art will become. I mean, there's just more. Why not? I mean, we have to. One of the things that came up during the conference was, well, first of all, without even trying, I mean, the amount of people, women that were in the room that were creating art that was exceptionally poignant and right, just really alive and fresh and excellent, and was just astounding. I mean, you could spend an entire season or two on just the people who were in the room, and they did such a fine job at sort of curating that pool of artists and administrators to sort of like get together and network with each other. And I think, that they're just all, what you get is you'll get an expansion of the art form. And I think that's what we all are looking for right now.
That's absolutely awesome. And, it brings to mind, one of my favorite quotes of Chimamanda Adichie.
Yeah.
And she talks about this danger of a single story.
Yes.
And that the danger of a single story is not that it is untrue, but that it is incomplete. And certainly the compositions we weave orchestrally in classical music are incomplete.
Yeah.
When do you feel as a female composer, when you compose, are there aspects of your gender that kind of become part of that process as you're creating? How does that kind of enter in?
I wouldn't say that. No, gender is what is a biological accident. And it doesn't, I mean, it certainly can't say that a note, Odetta, the guitar, rock guitarist, she had a quote that said, a note doesn't have a sex to it. It's either good or bad. And so, was it Odetta or was it, Thorpe, Rosetta Thornton. Oh, I'm going to get her name wrong. Rosetta, oh gosh, Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Gotcha.
But that idea that it's good or bad and doesn't kind of carry that.
Yeah, I think if anything, the relevance of being a female composer is that I can serve as as an example to other young women who want to compose, and they can see that I'm there doing it really in a committed way, and that's what's important, and that it's not just a man's world anymore. And that we can find a way, that we're all in this and able to participate in a free-spirited way.
Awesome. So to delve just a little bit more into this process, because I think for a lot of our viewers, we have, of course, there are those who are aspiring to follow in your footsteps, and I'll want to talk a little bit more about that. But I think there's also those who are administrators, or those who might be, performers who are more interpreters rather than creators, and who are looking and saying kind of, what is that creative process that you go through? So when you kind of begin that process, when an orchestra like the Dallas Symphony comes and says, you've got carte blanche, you can just create and, wherever you would like. What creative process do you go through? What are those first few steps that ultimately lead to the music that we hear?
I feel about composing the way Janos Starker said one time about performing. There's this quote, I'm not going to get it exactly right, but that his performances are in a way an interruption of his practice, or right, or
right.
It's right, and that they happen as part of a process of continuing to practice the cello.
Right.
And I feel the same. I feel like I'm very much studying how to compose every time I sit down to compose. And the piece that I write for Dallas is going to be in process of some ideas that I've been working through in regards to orchestration specifically, and using really large form vertical score. And you know, I have a whole book of sketches. The wonderful Gabriella Lena Frank advised me maybe 10 years ago. She said, make sure you have a book of sketches, that you keep track of all of your sketches. And I have several books full of sketches, and they're inklings, like they're ideas about color and about combinations of rhythms that I'm inspired by from listening to a very wide variety of music, from classical to jazz to African music to bluegrass and Celtic music. Became like a Celtic music fan at one point in my life. Oh. And you know, and just sort of, yeah, and like I feel like as a composer and also as an interpreter, yourself is like you're a processor. You process the information that comes in, and then you use that information to then retranslate it in your own way. And so I'll be, you know, and going through that process, I guess I can't tell you what the piece will be about because it's pretty abstract at the moment, but
cool.
But that's, yeah.
Awesome. No, that's great, and helps to give us a little bit of insight into that process for you. So one of the big things that we really like to do at the show is really, you know, help people to understand some of the functionalities of our field that all too often are not talked about. Mm-hmm. And so as I think about one of the things that so many aspiring composers and students who are looking, that seems like it's a mystery to them, which is, how do I become a composer? Mm-hmm. So in short, my question to you is, how did you become a composer? I've kind of known you this entire process, and I'm not exactly sure how you became a composer, yet here you are, extraordinarily accomplished composer. So what would be fantastic is, could you kind of help illuminate for our audience, functionally, what was that process? How did you get started? How did that happen? And how could others potentially who want to follow in your footsteps be able to do that?
Sure. When we're talking about, because being a composer means so many different things now, because especially with using different kinds of technology. So you don't have to be a composer that writes for people. You can be a composer that writes in Ableton and in Logic and records yourself and creates these like multi-dimensional layered things that you create. And then, so that's a different way than what I'll discuss. But for me, becoming a composer, but actually there's still one very essential point, which is becoming a composer is about sharing your music. The music whatever you create has to then become observed by someone else or performed by someone else in my case. So it was really about having the bravery to get over that one crucial step of, I have created this thing and now I'm going to share it with somebody. And once you actually go through that first process and somebody receives it and says, oh, okay, well, maybe my quartet, maybe we could play this. We'd love to play, we'd love to like give this a read and maybe we'll record it. Oh, okay. And then now I have this recording and I can put it up on my website, or I can share it with another colleague or another friend. It's very much about like most things, it's about community and about sharing what it is that you've created. So it's really, I wrote a thing, gave it to my friends, or I played it myself with my friends, and just kept kind of going through that process. And eventually your friends and your colleagues, as we go through this field, we all kind of establish ourselves within the field and continue to have access to different venues and performing opportunities here and there. And then it just, hopefully if you do go through that process enough times, it starts to sort of replicate on itself. And certainly, in my case, having the support of the Sphinx organization to help commission some of their pieces was huge. So, any kind of early communication with organizations who may have commissioning efforts in place. Starting those kinds of relationships is extremely important. Yeah, and any kinds of, and there are lots of competitions that you can enter as well. That's another way to have the opportunity to have other people view your work. So it's really about sharing, you're being brave enough to share what you've done.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
No, I think that definitely helps shed some light on the process. The
Yeah.
so is there you know, it's interesting, we talked a little about, you know, this aspect of gender in composition. Have you found that any kind of challenges being a composer of color, and or challenges or opportunities, and do you find that winds its way into your creative process at all?
Yeah, I would say as a Black person, Black creator, I've had a couple of strange obstacles that I fortunately at the time was a little too naive to realize what was going on. But I have had people try to hold me back because they prejudged me on my abilities. I luckily, like I said, I just went around it, and because I was like, that was strange. Let me try it another way, you know. And so, and also, you know, in working in classical music, which is a white European construct, sort of, I do like to bring in influences from, like, having grown up in New York City and like listening to a lot of hip hop and jazz and R&B and sort of harmonies that that are reflective of that. And also I've been really interested in learning more about African music, and so I've been sort of studying a little time, you know, very little at this point, but bits of West African drumming styles and rhythms that I've also sort of, again, like just been inspired by. And so I've wondered sometimes if putting those elements into the music would confuse the players or confuse the music or confuse the listening in some way. And I've had to, you know, work through that so that I feel confident in my choices and not feel like I'm, you know, so that I can feel confident in the identity that lives within my music and within myself, and feel honest in sharing that, and not try to code it in a way that you know, that makes it comfortable for the players or for the listeners. And I can say that I'm still working on that, and yeah, so that in a way becomes that has been a challenge for me, that I know you know, there are other composers who are much more bold than me in the process and where they are. I think I'm still sort of growing through that process. Yeah, and again, I mean, as a woman, I think probably one of the bigger challenges is, and will continue to be, being in a leadership role, because it more has, for me, I imagine it has to do with sort of power dynamics in the structure of how ensembles function, or bands, and leadership within a band. So, you know, exercising a leadership role as a woman can be challenging depending on who you're working with. So those are some of the things, yeah, that I'm kind of working with.
Awesome. Well, this is amazing, and unfortunately, we're just about out of time. But I just want to ask one last quick question, which is that, you know, thinking about some of those challenges that, you know, when you might have faced them, whether, you know, relating to being a Black artist or gender or just composing, I can only imagine there's got to be moments in time where you're like, where's it going to come from?
Exactly.
How am I going to create? What do you do in those moments that are hardest? What do you have a way or a method or something that you go to that gives you that source of strength, of inspiration, so that you can get past those obstacles?
I meditate a lot, and I write. I do something other than compose usually when I have those moments. take a walk, reflect. A lot of it has to do with, you just have blocks because if we're really in a fully creative space, whatever comes in can be filtered organically and then recreated and reimagined. And when that process is happening, it's really rewarding and feels good. When it's not feeling good, it's because you have a block. And so it's really about like self-preservation and meditation and making sure that those passageways are open so that you can be fully present in your creative life. And so,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, Jessie Montgomery, you truly are one of the arts engines that is powering human creativity in our field. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much, Erin. It's such a pleasure.